Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be creating some beautiful high-end farmhouse decor using Dollar Tree items. Let's get started on our first project. For this project, we're going to be using 3 of these Dollar Tree signs. They measure 6.5 inches by 6.5 inches. Now, because I'm making a pair, I'm actually going to be using 6 of these, but I'm going to show you how to make one. After removing the backing, I'm going to give each one of these frames at least 2 coats of white chalk paint. Some of them will take 3 coats, and I did make sure to paint the back side as well. Set one of the frames off to the side. We're going to be using 2 of them, will actually be 4 if you're making a pair, and using some of these quart paint sticks from Lowe's. You get 30 in a pack for $1. To create a pair, we're going to be using 24 of these. I'm going to cut the rounded end off with my handheld miter shears. You can find this in my Amazon store in the link in my description box below if you are interested in those. Set it inside the groove of the backing of the frame, make a mark to know where to cut so everything will sit and rest inside the frame. So you'll need 6 for each frame, which is a total of 24. For the other 2 additional frames that will be the centerpieces, we are using this corrugated metal sign from Dollar Tree, so you'll need 2 of these. And I'm going to hold that inside the grooves so that I can cut the side down that has the hanger on. I'm going to make a mark using a Sharpie so that it will rest inside of the frame at the top and at the bottom, and then I'll connect those 2 lines. Of course, I just grabbed whatever was closest to me, which happened to be a level. To cut this, I'm using some tin snips, so you want to make sure that you are very, very careful to not cut yourself, because this tin is very sharp. Once you cut it, the edges will be extremely sharp. So you may want to wear gloves and probably maybe even some eye protection if you're trimming some very small pieces off. I found that it was easier to cut up the line until my tin snips couldn't reach anymore, and then come in from the side and cut that down and continue until I get to the end. Now for the bottom part, we're going to do the exact same thing by lining it up inside of the grooves of the frame, making our markings, drawing our line, and then cutting that down, making sure that everything will fit inside of the frame so that we can put the backing back on. Now before we put the backing on, I'm using some of this scrap wood that I had. It measures about 1 inch wide and it's about 1/4 inch deep. I am going to hold this under the frame, so the front part of the frame is resting on the wood, and then I'm going to draw my angles out from each corner. So I have the wood lined up from one corner to the other. I'll draw those angles out, and then I'm using my handheld miter box and saw, which mine, by the way, is so old and rusty. I think I need to purchase a new one because it's getting quite dull. I'm going to go through and cut all of those angles out for that piece of wood. Once I have those cut down, I'm going to put this back inside of the frame to make sure that it sits inside of it. So it's not sitting in the part that's resting where the back goes back into it. It's actually fitting inside of the frame. So once I know that's going to fit, I'm going to take the same wood, hold it underneath, and go from the other corners, make those markings as well as the marking in the middle, because we're going to cut this into 2 separate pieces so that when we put our X back into our frame, everything will sit flush with the wood piece that's already in there. Again, I'm going to cut all of these down with my handsaw and place them inside of the frame to make sure everything's going to line up and that everything is going to fit perfectly. Again, because I'm making a pair, I am going to create 2 of these. So once I have both of those cut down, I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper to sand all those rough edges out from all the end pieces that I have just cut. And then I'm going to create a stain. I'm using antique wax, and I'm going to mix some water. So it's about a 1:1 ratio of water to wax, and I'm going to shake that very thoroughly, and it's just going to give us like a very light, watery, thin type stain. I'm using a lint-free cloth to go over each one of our paint sticks that we have cut down. I'm doing the front and the sides, as well as the other wood pieces that we cut out. Again, make sure you get those sides because you will be able to see those. So as they're drying, we're going to take the picture frames and we're going to use a foam brush and the same water antique wax mixture, and we're going to apply these to the frames. So originally I was going to use a chip brush, but I decided not to because the foam brush was giving me the effect that I was really going for. So you're just going to take a layer of that water mixture and go around the entire frame, especially on those inside edges, because you will be able to see that once the project is complete. I only had to put one layer on, and it does take a little while to dry because it is watered down. So just be careful and be patient and allow them to thoroughly dry before you handle them. Now here, mine have already dried, and I'm going to use some clear Gorilla Glue. Now the manufacturer recommends that you dampen the area before you apply the glue. So I'm using a wet paper towel and dampening the side of the frame, then applying the Gorilla Glue, and I'm going to add just a couple of dots of hot glue to temporarily hold that in place so that I can add the frame at the other side. So once I have these two added together, I'm going to place some clamps on there and make sure everything stays flat and even, and then I'll add the third frame to the other side. So this is going to create two of our shutters, so each one will have 3 frames. I'm going to place those clamps on there and allow that Gorilla Glue to thoroughly set up. So I let mine set up for several hours. While that's setting, I'm going to focus on the backs of the frames. Now this is not completely necessary, but since the paper doesn't peel off and the wording is a little bright, I wanted to take some regular copy paper and cover up that wording just in case you could see through it. So you only need to do this for 4 of the frames because the one in the middle will be completely covered, but the one with the paint sticks, you may be able to see between those paint sticks because we're not going to be gluing those down. So once I have all of that in place, my glue has now set on my frames. I wanted to add a little bit more stability to the back. So I'm going to use my staple gun and staple the seams between the 3 frames. I just added a couple in between each of the frames. Now we can take our paint sticks and apply those in the top and bottom frame. I'm not attaching them with glue. The backing will hold that in there, but that's why we covered the backing up in case you could see in between the paint sticks because they're not perfectly straight. In the middle one, we'll place our corrugated metal piece, put our backing back on, and then we can flip this over and add our wood X piece right across the metal piece. Again, I'm going to make sure everything sits in there flush before I attach it, and I'm going to just add some hot glue to the bottom edge of each of the corner pieces and then glue that down to the sides of the frame. So as you're pushing that down, if you get a little bit of glue that comes out, make sure you go ahead and wipe that off. Then we'll do the exact same thing for the other side. I like to place them inside of the frame as I'm gluing the other piece down so I can make sure the end pieces that cross line up perfectly. And again, I'm putting this on the bottom part of the piece of wood so it doesn't ooze up through the top. So now that I have this together, it has a little bit of weight to it, and I want to add even more stability to make sure these 3 frames don't come apart. So I'm going to take some of these smaller craft sticks that you can get at Dollar Tree and hot glue those in between where each one of the frames meet, so you'll have 4 on the back. But make sure you push them over enough so that you don't see it from the side when you hang your piece up. Of course, repeat this with your other one, and now you have a pair of beautiful wooden shutters. I love how these turned out. They look gorgeous just by themselves, but they also look really beautiful as a grouping with a nice picture or something in the center. You guys let me know what you think of project number 1. For our next project, we're using 4 of Dollar General's wooden garden stakes. They are 3/4 of an inch square. They sell for $1 a piece. We're going to cut 2 of those down to 24 5/8 of an inch and the other 2 down to 18 1/4 of an inch to create a frame. I'm going to have the top and bottom piece rest on top of the 2 side pieces. So once I know everything's going to be square, I'm going to take a drill bit and drill a hole through the bottom piece into the side piece. And then I can attach this with a screw. So I pre-drilled my hole to make sure that my wood does not split as I put the screw in. I did that for all 4 corners. Now we're going to use 4 of Dollar Tree's very long barbecue skewers. We actually end up only needing 3 of those. I'm going to give each of this 2 coats of white chalk paint. So I painted the entire frame, front and back, as well as each one of those barbecue skewers. Using 2 of Dollar Tree's garden fences, we're going to cut the outside edging pieces off. Now you can use a utility knife and score this and then break it off, but I'm just going to use my tin snips because it cuts fairly straight and it makes this work very easy. So I'll trim those 2 outside edges down as well as the other 2 outside edges, and you want to get it as close and as straight as possible, and then cut each of the bottom stake parts off, and you'll do this for both of the frames. And this is how it should look once you cut all those tabs off. We're going to take our second piece and we're going to flip it around so that they are facing opposite directions. Now, if need be, you could take some sandpaper and sand that down to make sure all the edges are very smooth. To attach these, I'm going to flip them over, so now we're looking at the back side of the fencing, and I'm taking some regular craft sticks, and I'm going to glue them to the seams between the 2. So they're just butted up to each other, and I'm squeezing it together to make sure I get a nice tight fit, and then hot gluing those sticks down. Now I'm leaving a little bit hanging off the edge of the 2 outside pieces, and you'll see why in just a minute. So once I have that middle secure, I'm going to take some of the craft sticks and cut them down into smaller pieces to attach to the outside part of the frame. So you want to have about the same amount hangover as we did on the middle piece, but you don't want to be able to see the other end that we're gluing down through the fencing. So just hold that in place and let the hot glue set up, and I'm going to add 1 at the bottom and at the top, and I'll do that on the other side as well. So you'll have 2 craft sticks on each of the sides, the little 2 small pieces, and then where each of the arches are in the fence, we're going to add 1 in the very center on each one of these, at the top and at the bottom. Again, trying to make sure you have about the same distance for each one of the sticks hanging over from the fencing. Now, once we have all of this in place, I'm going to take my hair dryer, go through and try to remove all of those glue strands, and what my hair dryer doesn't get, I'll go back in and pick those off. Now, I'm taking some black chalk paint, and I'm painting the ends of those craft sticks and the sides just in case you can see those when we put it on our frame. And then again, I'm going to paint the outside edging as well. To assemble this, I'm going to place the fencing upside down, and those little craft sticks are going to rest on the back side of our frame. So once I get everything in there, make sure it's going to fit and push it down. You're going to have a little bounce in the middle, but that's okay. We're going to fix that when we get towards the end of the project. I'm going to lift up and glue each one of those craft sticks down all the way around the frame. And now when you flip it over, it's going to have, like I said, a little bounce in the middle, but that's okay. This is where these barbecue skewers are going to come into play. So I want to put 1 in between each of the seams of the arches, and we're going to create like a faux window. So I'm holding that in place, making my marking, cutting that down, and then I'm just going to set it in there for right now before I glue it down. If need be, you want a nice tight fit, so if it doesn't fit perfectly, just run it over some sandpaper until you can get that to fit in there nice and tight. I did that for the 3 sections where all of those meet, and then I can go in and glue each one of those barbecue skewers down. Then I'm going to take the other barbecue skewer and measure the distance between each one of the barbecue skewers in the frame that we just placed. So again, I'm just going to hold it up there, mark it, make sure everything lines up, and then I can go back in and glue each one of these down. That's going to take the bounce out of your fencing, but it's also going to create this beautiful faux wrought iron window. Now you can hang this up with the picture hanging command strips, or you could put a hanger on the back, or you could just lean it up against something and not hang it up. I love how this project turned out, and I cannot wait to share with you how well it looks with our next project. Now, before we get started on that, if you're enjoying today's projects, I would love for you to stick around and become part of our community here by clicking on that subscribe button. To all my current subscribers, thank you so much. And I would also love for you to visit me on my other social media accounts. All those links are in my description box below. Okay, for project number 3, we're going to use that short piece of the garden stake that we cut off. This one measures about 11 3/8 of an inch. We're going to measure down 4 1/4 of an inch from the top and use our handheld saw to cut that off. Sand all of those rough edges down, and then I'm using a drill bit and I'm going to drill in the center of that shorter piece on each end. So once we get those done, you're going to try to get it as centered as possible. We're going to drill a hole in the end, not the end with the point, the other end, in the center of that towards the top, and we're going to drill that all the way through. This is how we're going to connect this piece to the shorter piece. Now, once I remove all of the little rough edges, I'm going to apply a screw through the piece with the pointed end, and we're going to screw that into one of those pre-drilled holes on the other end. So it should be looking something like this, like an upside down L. For the other pre-drilled hole, I'm going to add a hook. This is just some hooks that I already had on hand. I think you maybe can find these at Walmart. I'm going to hand screw that in. Now you could leave it up or you can leave the hook down. I kind of like it facing up, so that's the way I'm going to leave mine. We're also using 2 of these LED hanging lamps from Dollar Tree. We're going to remove that light bulb piece, and then we're going to tuck our light strand back down inside of that so that we can tape this off because we're going to be painting everything. I just placed some tape in there and make sure that I had everything covered up so when I spray paint this, the paint does not get down inside of that. And I also flipped it over and I'm going to tape off that top piece because I don't want the paint to get down into all of those mechanisms for the light. So I find it's easier to just apply your tape and then flip it over, use a utility knife to trim off the excess so everything's nice and clean with your tape. We're going to be using one of these wired baskets from Dollar Tree. They measure 5 inches in diameter at the bottom and 8 inches at the top. We're also going to be spraying all of this with some Krylon Fusion matte black paint. So I'm making a pair, so I have duplicates of everything. I have it set out with the lampshades and I've taken the hangers off. Then we have our wood pieces that we put together as well as our wire baskets. This is only going to take 1 coat of the black spray paint. Allow that to thoroughly dry and don't forget to flip everything over and make sure you spray the inside piece. Now, once everything has dried, I'm going to bring it back inside and remove my tape from the bottom and then remove it from the top. So I still want the top to be black. I'm going to paint that with a paintbrush and some black chalk paint. So this way I can very carefully paint that and make sure paint does not get down inside of the little lamp to ruin any of the mechanisms that will make the lamp work. Once dried, we can now take our string lights and feed that back into the light bulb and twist that back in. And I'm going to make sure that it's going to work before I move forward. It is so pretty. Now, once I have all of those to put back together, it is time for us to make our hanging lamp. So this is the bottom part of the basket. I'm going to set the lampshade underneath the basket and then attach it with the hook or the hanger that came with it into the center section of each of the lamps. Then we can just hang that right on top of the hook that we have on our wood piece. Now for mine, I'm going to hang them up with 2 of the picture hangers on the back, but you could also screw this straight into the wall. And you guys, look how beautiful they turned out for about $2.50 each, and they are gorgeous with our faux wrought iron window. You guys, if you have a favorite project out of today's video, please let me know in the comments down below. I always love to know which one is your favorite. Thank you so much for watching. Please take care, and I will see you next time.